This is part three of the Enhancing Mentoring Excellence, Exploring the Elements of Effective Practice for Mentoring, the fifth edition. And today we're going to be talking about practices and systems that sustain mentoring programs. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Senior Manager of Field Learning at Mentor National. Again, happy to have you all here. And we are recording, so I don't even need to do that perfect. And I'll move on to the next slide to share a little bit about the rest of the folks who are on this call today. So as I said, Jake Sullivan, Senior Manager of Field Learning, and we also have Mike Geringer, Senior Director of Research and Quality. Mike, if you want to say hi.
Hi, good to be with you. Good to be
Perfect.
with you all today.
Perfect. And then the two hosts of today's meeting, we have Sarah DeButer from Mentor Vermont, Training and Support Director, and also Master Trainer at Mentor. And then Elton Dixon, Technical Assistance Provider and Master Trainer at Mentor as well, if you both want to say hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Amazing. Short and sweet intros today.
Yes,
Love it.
you'll hear plenty from us later.
Yeah. And moving on to some session engagement. So we want to hear from you all today. So as you're coming in, feel free to continue dropping your name and where you're calling in from in the chat. Want to see who's representing across the country, across the world, potentially. I know sometimes we get some international viewers with us, but continue to introduce yourself, talk and share resources with one another. We know that all of you are doing great work out there, so we want to hear from you and hear what's worked for you, what hasn't, what things you've tried, that sort of thing. And then, of course, respond to our presenters. So you can do that either through the chat box. You can also do that with using the emoji react. We love to see the hearts and the laughter come through to get to know how you're feeling throughout the session. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please drop those in the Q&A box, which should be on the toolbar on your screen. And we have, I think, probably a couple different points in time where we'll check in and answer any questions that you have. And then you should also be able to upvote if there's a question you really want to make sure that we get to. And then, of course, there's always the CC button on that same toolbar where you can click to enable captions. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded and it'll also be sent out in about a week with the slides, and it'll also be posted to Mentor's website along with any other resources that we talk about today. And again, this is the third part of the series, and so we'll talk about moving forward, how else you can engage with Mentor towards the end of the webinar. And with that, I believe I'm passing it over to Sarah and Elton.
Yay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final webinar of this series. We're going to be reviewing that third section. And so we're really excited to dive in, but we're going to do a little bit of an overview first about what we're going to be touching on today, our format, and I'll pass it over to Elton.
Yeah, it feels like senior year, last round. We all know we're going to go through this together and say goodbye for a little while, but I hope we get to connect with as many of you as possible going forward, continue talking about what we're learning on this webinar. But yeah, back to you, Sarah.
Yeah. So we're going to highlight some changes. We're going to explore new features and researcher insights. So we've touched on a lot of this in every session that we've had, and I do see a chat or question in the chat that Jake just answered. Thank you, Jake. So you can find the slides by going to mentoring.org/CMWS.
Yes. And I hope a lot of you have been a part of the first two webinars, and this feels like a really smooth continuation. But we're planning for a lot of Q&A today as we kind of wrap up the entire series. So hopefully everyone gets some questions answered.
Yes. And I would like to make a note too that if any of you are not executive director or leader of your organization, those last four elements are still applied to you in your work. And we're going to talk a lot about big program versus small programs today and how this work is still applicable.
Yeah. And maybe as an early warning, from our first two sessions, you heard us talk a lot about logic models. And I think throughout this talk today, we're probably going to bounce back to those discussions quite a bit, because that was sort of the centerpiece of being able to describe and illustrate the work that all the different programs do. So
It's
be
all
ready for that.
connected. Absolutely. All right, next slide, please. So Elton and I are pretty proud of this. We're going to talk a little bit about organizational health in this third section. And so what are the common things that we have checked when we go for our annual checkup or our doctor's visit? You have your weight check, your heart rate checked, your temperature, and your blood pressure, right? So when we think about organizational health, we think about what is your capacity. So your weight check is the capacity.
Absolutely. And then when you think about taking the pulse of the community, you know, the rhythm of the community, how it works, how different organizations collaborate, and you want to plug into that, or maybe you are sort of a leader in your community and others plug into what you're doing. It's kind of like taking that pulse rate.
Absolutely. And how many of us have walked by a bank or a benefit when they have that temperature gauge to show how much money that they've earned so far towards their goal, right? So your temperature check is your sustainability, and we're going to talk a lot about that today as well.
Yes. And then, you know, no matter what role you played in an organization or what kind of work you do, it's always important to take care of yourself, to do that wellness check, self-care. And that's what enables us to stay in the work, stay encouraged, stay plugged into our community. So that's kind of like your blood pressure, you know, the tension on your vessels as your life force is pumping through your body. Well, we want that to be healthy, and that you know how to take care of yourself as you support others.
And all of this wraps into your heart work, right? Your organizational health really means that you have to take care of all of these different things to have a really strong and good heart. And this work is heart work. And if you do have a question, we do have a Q&A box. So please drop questions there. Jake is going to make sure that we pay attention to those as we keep going through this presentation.
Yeah. And Sarah, you kind of touched on something in terms of heart work, and I know we talked about this a little bit. Just um, folks that are attracted, that are drawn to this kind of work, you know, as a calling, as just their area of expertise. You know, we tend to be very relational people, and discussions like we had back in section 1 and now section 3, which focus on program structure, it can feel like a departure from that really relational part of your work. But what we want to highlight is that working on the structure of your program is an act of love, because what you're doing is enabling yourself to provide better service, better support for a longer amount of time to the people that you care for. So this matters tremendously, and we hope it doesn't feel like a departure from the things that are expressed love in a relationship, but that this too is an important way that we express love for those that we care for. So we hope you see it that way.
Yeah.
And Elton, if I could just piggyback on that
Yeah.
briefly. I've had folks over the years ask me, like, well, hey, why does this book that is about kind of providing a caring service to young people, like, why does it have this section at the end that is kind of about business stuff, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? Like staffing and fundraising and marketing and all that. Like, that feels like a whole different thing. But I just want to say that we included that really intentionally, because I've been in this field for longer than I would care to admit out loud. But over those many years, I've seen really good programs go away because they were not attending to these things. They got into this work because they wanted to help kids in their community, they wanted to rally adults around a cause, and they do good work with that. But most mentoring folks are not business types, right? We're in this for the heart side of it, and certainly often not a profit motive, right? And so it's easy to kind of maybe put these things on the back burner. But I think what the danger is when you're, to take the organizational health metaphor to its ultimate conclusion, if you're not taking care of the patient can get really sick and maybe pass away, right? And so that leaves then young people in a vulnerable position where their relationship that you've helped create is now either ending or on its own, and you have volunteers that are frustrated, and maybe they don't volunteer down the road for some other program, or maybe funders sour on mentoring, and so what we're trying to avoid with this section is poor organizational health, and even sudden, kind of catastrophic closure of your services. And I've seen it too many times. And so I think when we put together this iteration of the elements, we really wanted to say, like, hey, these practices, to Elton's point, are just as important as the other ones, because they're how you keep that love going, right? And so I hope folks really lean into these topics, even if things like, staff development and fundraising aren't your normal wheelhouse or areas of expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, so much. We're going to be talking about that. So a quick brief EEPM history. The EEPM was initially published in 1991. It's evolved over time in scope and complexity, with continual improvement by experienced program staff and focus groups, making sure that they're working directly with Mike and his team so that this newest edition is really meant for those of you on the ground. And it's got community engagement. It has more about how to engage caregivers. It has youth voice and youth engagement really embedded throughout all of the elements. It has completely new elements that we talked about in prior sessions. And so we're really, really pleased with this newest edition.
Yeah. I hope since our first session that many of you have had the chance to go online and take a look at the document and just explore it and see what a tremendous resource it is and all the work that's gone into improving it. And and Sarah and I, and of course Jake and Mike, we're really aware that a lot of what it describes an ideal that we're working toward. You may not find your program where the descriptions of a healthy program are now, but we hope it's sort of like a North Star to keep moving toward for that idea of continual improvement. But in our talk today, we will really try to, we have a lot of empathy for where you may be right now and try to think about the reality of what you're experiencing now as we talk about your journey toward improvement.
Absolutely. Elton, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yes, I do. So you know that we've been going through piece by piece the different sections now of the elements, and before there were a total of 6 elements, and they were organized in a way where there's a lot of content jammed into each one, and a lot of things to explore. But part of the improvements on the expression of the elements of effective practice for mentoring was to break it out into something far more descriptive of the different pieces of a program that every mentoring organization needs to be thinking about, whether you are a small program, a large program, whether you are a staff leader or you're supporting that organization as an employee or something. So, or this is the description of the 16 elements that we now have for the 5th edition. And we're going to be down there in section 3, practices to support organizational health, as we alluded to with our organizational health analogy. We're going to look at maintaining leadership and staffing, engaging the broader community, building capacity and infrastructure. We'll probably sit there for a little bit because I know funding is something that's always on everyone's mind, but we want to help expand our concept of what capacity and infrastructure are beyond just the books. And then talk about program evaluation, which is another part, like what Mike was just sharing. It can be kind of overlooked. It can just be seen as something that's, it's important to measure, but if you don't have the right instruments in place, you might not be getting the benefit of measuring your program impact. So it may seem like something kind of extra or to the side. But we want to talk about that a little bit today and how you can have a very effective evaluation program that feeds right back as a continuous loop to your program design and how you deliver, so that you really are learning from your community. You're learning from your mentors and mentees. You're learning from your processes how to continually improve. So that's what it looks like now, and we're going to dig into it.
We sure are. And starting with element 13, program leadership and staffing. Now, I do think that this is one of those elements where if you are a program with multiple staff, you might feel like, okay, I don't have to worry about this one because my leader has it. Or if you're a small program, you're looking at this and you're saying, staffing, you mean just me. Don't worry, we're going to talk to all of you. So on the screen here, we have the standard of practice. I am not going to read that out loud, but at the beginning of every element, we have a standard of practice and practices that support the elements. And I highly recommend you look at that page at the beginning of every element at the bare minimum, just because our National Quality Mentoring System, or NQMS, is directly related to the elements of effective practice. And these are how we're evaluating the quality of your program. We are going to go over some key highlights from this element, though. So, what are some of the highlights from this element? The standards supporting, or the practices that support the standard practice. So, you need strong leadership, and staffing are the foundation of program quality. And that means that if you are a small program with a part-time coordinator, you need to make sure that you are building a support system around yourself, because you are the foundation of your program, right? And we're going to give a little bit more about how we can help you do that. Part of that is your boards and advisory groups. And are they there to support you, or are they just a sitting board with people that say, I want to be part of a board? What does that look like? What does that mean? How are you engaging with them? What type of support are you getting from them? Also, your board and advisory groups should reflect the diversity of the community that you are serving and include youth and caregiver voices. Alton, what do you think about
Yes.
that one?
Well, we were talking, I alluded to this a second ago. We want to talk about the reality you may be experiencing now versus the ideal that you're marching toward. And this may be a situation where, for many organizations, boards are a frustration. You're getting folks who aren't dealing with your work on a day-to-day basis, and you may feel like they are folks who, they're cheering for you, they're rooting for you, but they're not really sure exactly where to plug in and really support the work that you're doing. So, um, or you may feel that they don't yet represent the diversity of the community that you serve in your mentoring. So, in either case, maybe something to think about. I definitely recommend this in technical assistance. Is just like you would have job descriptions for your staff, you know, you and hopefully everyone does. And hopefully those job descriptions are directly aligned with things that are spelled out in your logic model. Like we said, we're going to be pointing back to that. But every function in your logic model, someone should have it in their job description to fulfill in some kind of way. Well, in the same way, many board members might say, I'm here to support, I'm here to go to the meetings, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, like what my lane is or what my responsibilities are when I show up to a board meeting. And you may find that maybe a job description helps that person focus and feel very intentional about how they support you. What that means is the people that come to you to provide that support, you don't know when they come from the community, you don't know if they will necessarily really represent the diversity, racially, gender-wise, whatever it is. They're just a passionate person who knows how to support you. But as you continue to communicate your message really clearly and really express, who it is you're serving, hopefully you draw folks who represent that diversity And not only do they come to you, but they're clear on how to keep supporting you through something like job descriptions or something that describes those lanes in the road. And so you don't have to feel bad that, I mean, man, we don't have BIPOC, or we don't have certain minority groups. We don't have certain folks on our board. Does that mean we're doing something wrong? Well, it's important that you have passionate people. And again, when you explain your message well, it is likely you will draw folks from those diverse communities to be a part of the work too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, another thing I would mention, and this is more of a caution coming from the programs that I work with, living in a state that is lacking in significant amounts of diversity. When we say that your board and advisory group should reflect the diversity of your community, I caution you not to silo yourself or use that as an excuse, right? So, okay, you're in the second whitest state in the country, and so you have one BIPOC person on your board, and that reflects the general ratio of the diversity of the community you're living in. But do we settle for that? I don't think so. We want to have a board that is also striving towards what we want our community to look like.
Mm.
Or maybe we don't have a lot of people with disabilities, intellectual or developmental or physical, in our program, but we want people to know that we serve those populations. So maybe we need to have someone on our board that can help us tap into those communities and make our program more accessible.
Mm.
Are you involving your board in your strategic planning, in your theory of change, in your logic model, so that they understand not only the journey that your young person is going through and the long-term impact you want in your community, but also where you're going
Mm.
and the outcomes you're hoping to achieve? Mike, it sounds like looks like you have something you want
Yeah,
to
sorry, my mute
say.
button is malfunctioning here. I think I'll add an additional perspective. I think a lot of times when folks see the word diversity, they think about many of the demographic things you mentioned, race, ethnicity, disability status, gender. These are all important things, obviously. I also think it's important to have a diversity of opinions and perspectives. And I think when I look at board compositions of nonprofits generally and of mentoring programs, maybe more specifically, let's face it, people put a lot of wealthy people on their boards. Part of a board's responsibility, to your point, Elton, is to support the financial resources of the organization. And that's great, right? We need resources to do our work. But I think what sometimes happens is you wind up then involving folks that come from a different layer or segment of society than maybe your staff, and probably almost certainly the young people and families and community that you're serving, right? And I have seen programs really struggle with misaligned perspectives and expectations, right? It is, class matters in America, unfortunately. And I have seen plenty of people who live very privileged lives think very bizarre things about younger people in general, communities of color, communities that are maybe less well resourced. And so there can be this tremendous disconnect between what your leadership and your board thinks your young people and your families and your community needs, and maybe what those people are telling you they want from your mentoring program and what the goals of that program should be. And so I think there's the demographic diversity that I think really matters, and that will help bring, a good array of perspectives as well. But I also think, we just need to make sure that there isn't this fundamental gap between the folks making decisions about your program and the folks that are impacted by those decisions. And so I just encourage everybody to think about the composition of your board. It doesn't always have to be exclusively people that can bring money or resources to the table, right? It can be, heck, there could be young people that have a role in your board in making those decisions, right? And so we'll talk more about that here as we move forward. But that word diversity, it means a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
just wanted to note that.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Mike.
And
And
Sarah,
I think, oh.
no, no, go ahead, Sarah.
I think what I love about what you said is it taps into, I feel like I'm kind of wearing my small program representative hat today because that's a majority of the programs that I work with. And that diversity of perspective is so important for a part-time staff who is running an entire program to really get the support that they need so that we don't have burnout from and high turnover rates of those small program or small part-time program coordinators because they don't have the support they need. And sometimes that's, we live in a rural community. Do I know somebody who's really tapped into that community and can I get them on my board so that I can get more buy-in from this community because we have that perspective. And so I think that is just as important in board composition. And
Mm,
Jake did drop in the chat more resources for how to do that. So we won't talk too much more about this, but it's important.
for sure. And I wanted to just say one last thing. Um, we kind of talked about tokenism, Sarah, and
Mhm.
whenever we are doing that, including those voices, especially when it comes to something like youth, who sometimes are brought in, but we want to make sure that they have access to the data that we're looking at. They have access to the logic model or school attendance numbers or something like that. So when, youth voice is important, but informed youth voice is really important. And they can help think about their peers and what they see every day at school or in their community and say, I see the connection. Now here's what I think about this. And then once we open up the door for a diversity of opinions, there must be a mechanism where everyone sees that those opinions are affecting our program design, not just talking about it at the board meeting. So when all that's in place, yeah, strong leadership and staffing.
Yeah, absolutely. The next highlight that we have here from this element is staff recruitment, retention, and manageable caseloads prevent burnout and turnover. So, Jake, if you can drop that staff calculator into the chat again, this is a resource we talked about last time, but I do think that it's a helpful resource to also identify how many matches you're able to support with the limited number of hours you have. And again, small program hat on here, when I talk about this, um, say you're a part-time coordinator and you only have 25 or 30 hours a week and you're running an entire program. So how many hours do you need to support your matches? How many hours are you spending recruiting? How many hours are you spending actively doing fund development and sustainability? And then how many hours are you engaging with your board or engaging in the community or writing that newsletter or engaging in marketing? And all of that adds up to, well, how many matches can you reasonably actually support in your role on a given week? And what are your busy periods and what are your kind of slower times? So I think this is just a helpful calculator to really get a gauge for what you need in order to advocate for yourself with your board and or your supervisor, depending on if you're a bigger program. Next slide,
Absolutely.
please.
So Sarah, before we move on, I want to share a little something with our audience around the concept of burnout in our field. I don't need to tell this audience that working with young people and working in the nonprofit space, and it comes with some challenges and some stresses and stuff, but you may be wondering like, well, how pervasive is this type of issue, right? When we're serving more kids than we probably should be for the reasons Sarah mentioned, like what does that result in? Well, Mentor did a survey a few months back of mentoring professionals. If anyone in this meeting actually filled out that survey, thank you so much. You were part of about almost 1,000 folks across the country that answered this survey. So it's a pretty representative slice of folks who work in this field. Now, we haven't put out our big final report on this yet. So you folks are the first people in America to hear these statistics outside of the walls of Mentor. But 43% of everyone who filled out our survey said that one of their top challenges was kind of workload concerns or burnout or both, right? So 33% specifically mentioned um, workload, not enough staff to support the day-to-day services. Another 33% mentioned compassion fatigue and just burnout from the challenges of doing this work under the circumstances they're doing it. And so I really encourage, if any of you in this call are leaders of programs, pay attention to these issues and support your staff, like really support them. And that could be with pay, it could be with professional development. 12% of folks said lack of professional development was a major barrier to their feeling good about their work. And 10% of our sample said their big pain point was lack of leadership in their own program, right? And inadequate kind of guidance from their executive directors and board, right? And so if you are a program leader, just know that these challenges are real. And if people leave and leave suddenly because they're unhappy in their job, well, then you're not going to make the magic of mentoring happen anyways, right? And so these are real pain points for our field. And I just wanted to put a number on some of those sentiments.
For sure. That's great, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have some really good commentary in the chat as well. So difficult to support your matches when you're only focused on number of matches. I mentioned this in our last training, and I'm going to say it again. When you focus on the quality of your program and the quality of the support you're providing to your matches, those numbers will come, because the biggest recruitment strategy any program has is word of mouth. When your mentees and your mentors are talking about how much they love their program to their friends and family, you're going to get more people interested in wanting to become involved. So quality brings quantity every time. And sometimes that does take time. And if you're hoping for, boom, a bunch of numbers all at once, well, then your quality is going to go down. And I'll make a reference back to Elton's really great metric that he showed in the first session as well. That really demonstrates what that looks like.
For sure. Thank you. And just wanted to also give a nod to programs that might have some different models that they're using. For instance, let's say I'm working in technical assistance right now with an organization that's leaning heavily toward e-mentoring, online platforms that support mentoring. And the idea is that there are a lot of efficiencies you get there. You can just access anyone anywhere, or maybe more consistency of matches because travel time and those kinds of things aren't an issue. But you still have to have some way of ensuring that that match quality is in place. That's everything from folks that understand the technology you're using for your platform and can manage all that and maintain all your accountability and safety of all the things that come with online matches. So there's no trade-off just because there's a different program model. The investment in quality always remains, and the core elements of a strong program are still in place. So if you have one of those different kinds of models or are thinking about them, just know they come with their own set of challenges or issues to pay close attention to, because as Sarah said, quality is the central piece of it all.
Absolutely. The comment on models, I think, is a really nice segue into this next highlights. And we spent a lot of time on this element, and I think it's really important. We are going to have more time for questions later, so just keeping things moving forward. Another highlight, ongoing training and professional development. Ensure staff can deliver services with fidelity and cultural responsiveness. And so recognized and supportive staff equals higher quality mentoring relationships. So what does this look like in practice? And what are some things that you can do? If you're a small program, again, that's kind of the hat I'm wearing throughout this today. how are you going to find time and build capacity for professional development when you already are dedicating all of your hours to supporting your small program? Have you tapped into your surrounding resources? Do you know what other programs exist in your area? And we're going to talk about this in the next element too, around community engagement. But what are ways that you can make sure you're supporting yourself and also gaining more perspective? One of the things that some of our Vermont programs do is they have a monthly Zoom meeting where they talk about the different things that they're struggling with and try and get support from other people. And these are all kinds of different program models: school-based, e-mentoring, community-based, group-based, peer mentoring. And they're happening on location and centers. They're happening in schools or out in the community. So having that diversity of perspective can be really helpful in allowing you to learn, grow, feel supported in ways that you might not necessarily have already known, and then also approach things from a different way. Are you tapped into your local mentor affiliate, and do they provide training opportunities or professional conferences that you can make sure you carve out one time a year to go to? And oftentimes you can find at least one local funder to cover that $250 registration fee or more, just so that you can have that one day of professional development and tap into group and collective learning. So these are all ways to kind of help yourself and advocate for yourself and learn. And through prioritizing these little moments, you're going to prevent that burnout that we were talking about. Now, I do see some raised hands, and I'm not sure if those raised hands are actually meant to be reacts, which we love, or if they're questions. If they're questions, you can drop them in our Q&A box.
Speaking of Q&A, what do you think? Want to jump into let's hear from our audience.
Does your staff reflect the communities you serve? And are they supported to thrive?
Is your staff supported to thrive? That's a great question.
Any answers in the chat?
See anything popping up? Let's see. Okay.
I don't. Yes. And we have yes. And I'm not sure if they have all of the support that they need, trying to build more supports for them. Yes, reflecting community. Use more resources and capacity for staffing support. That's really good. Monthly supervisions. These are all great responses. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
And for the question in the chat about Ohio doesn't have an affiliate, and there are states that don't have an affiliate. And thanks, Mike, for also dropping that answer. What youth supporting organizations are near you so that you can tap into the support and resources they might have? Are there any after school programs in your area that you can connect with? Because if there's one thing that I've learned being in the youth mentoring field, is that the Vermont or the after school field is really, really supported, and they have a lot of resources and a lot of professional development opportunities. And it's really natural partnership for mentoring to collaborate with those after school resources as well. And then also, do you know what other mentoring programs exist in your area, in your geographic location? Because I think that mentoring programs, connecting with other mentoring programs is so important, because we're trying to do the same thing. And unless you have a community where you have less than 20 kids there, more than likely you can't serve every kid in your community. And so there's going to probably be another mentoring program, or hopefully there might be. And so how are you working together to support the community that you're in? It's not always easy, and sometimes it takes consistently trying to build those bridges and consistently reaching out. But I definitely recommend canvassing your community and kind of doing that landscaping to find out what resources are available to you.
Mhm. And we'll definitely be digging into some discussion on the resources too, I think. And I'm looking at some of these comments and just thinking, sometimes when it comes to supporting your staff, professional development is kind of like the prime resource, just really staying connected to your field and growing in your skills. But a lot of times, many organizations report that they don't get the chance to do performance discussions, performance evals on with their team members, especially if you're a large team. And what can happen is that, let's say you have a role in the organization that's not directly connected with doing the matches, supervising matches. You're not really close to the relationships if you're that large of an organization, or you don't feel that close. And performance evaluations are some type of feedback to let folks know that they're doing a good job or how aligned their work is with the mission, but just helping them see how whatever their role is directly connected to the health of those matches. Sometimes it's just that extra encouragement to know that the things you do day to day, whether it feels direct or not, is extremely important. And making the time for that feedback is great. It seems like a little thing, but it's actually pretty huge,
Mhm.
especially in those larger organizations.
So if I could chime in real quick, and I know we already addressed it a little bit in the chat, but for anyone else who's wondering about kind of mentors affiliate network around the country and how might I connect with folks from Mentor more locally to me. We do not have an affiliate in all 50 states. We are working on that. But I think what I can tell everybody is that we really strive for 50 state, all of America coverage in our work, right? And so um, while our affiliates, if we do have one in your state, they tend to kind of own what's happening in your state, but there's really nothing that prevents any of you from reaching out to the state next door, or if you see one of our affiliates offering a training coming up that's maybe online. Um, in general, they all serve folks from kind of outside their core region to some degree. We try and avoid like turf wars around who's helping who, but there's a lot of help available to you from our network. So if you're in a state like Ohio that does not have an affiliate at this point in time, there's folks in adjacent states that could be able to help you. And they might even know of folks in, say, Ohio that have been doing kind of coalition building work and community building work around mentoring. I know that in Columbus, in particular, there was a group for a while that was doing some kind of regular meetings to kind of just learn from each other and support each other, maybe a little bit unofficially and not really as part of our work. I will also note that at this point in time, we are still operating the big federally funded Training and Technical Assistance Center for the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We are waiting to see if that project will continue in the years ahead. As you might imagine, lots of things up in the air in Washington, D.C. these days about what's staying or going, but we're hopeful that that will continue. And that is something where any program in the country can apply for free help, and then we will assign you to an appropriate affiliate. So even if you're in a place that does not have representation from Mentor on the ground, all of that is still available to you. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that and didn't want folks feeling, oh, well, I happen to be in a Nevada and there's no Mentor Nevada, so am I out of luck? You're not out of luck. We've got a lot of ways to get help to you for professional development and other things. So
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a couple of polls that we're going to pop up. So you should see this pop up on your screen and give it an answer. So what percentage of mentoring programs have only one paid staff members supporting their services?
This is like a quiz type poll, right?
Yeah.
What
So let's see, we have 75%, or 28% of you think 75%, 42, 41, 50%, 9%, 10. We'll go ahead and share the poll. So, as it would happen, 41% of you are absolutely correct. 50% of programs have one paid staff member supporting their services. And Mike mentioned earlier in the chat, but I asked him to delete it because I knew this poll was coming up, that 60% of programs have less than 3. So when we talk about a small versus large program, we're talking about staff. And also, when we talk about staff, like the number of staff, sometimes that statistic isn't counting like how many of those programs are part-time hours versus full-time employee hours.
Hmm.
Many of the programs I'm working with in Vermont have a staff of 1, and many of those staff of 1 are part-time, 30 hours or less. And so how are they supporting their communities? You can think of match numbers as a way to indicate small versus large, but I do think that your staff numbers will dictate the number of matches you can support. So that's a good way to think about that.
Absolutely true.
Next poll, please. How many staff are in your program? Let's do some national sampling on this statistic. Okay.
Can we get to 100% participation? It's climbing.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Right now, we're at 68% of you having participated.
Yes, please share this one. This is great for us to use for the remainder of our talk today.
We're still gathering our data, so we haven't shared the poll yet. But if you aren't seeing it pop up on your screen, the question is how many staff are in your program? It doesn't define full-time or part-time. Okay. We have 71% participating. I'd love to get to 80. So if you can drop your answers, but I do feel like we're hitting a stagnate. So let's,
Yeah.
oh, we're so close. All right, let's share the poll.
That's not bad.
Yeah, 78% of you, so 2% away. And you know what? This looks like it's adhering to that national average. 27% of you, 2 to 3 staff, 16%, 1 full-time staff, 11%, 1 part-time staff, 18% 4 to 5, and 27% 6 plus.
Yeah. Hmm.
So this is just a small national sampling from all of you, but I think it helps to frame like what different mentoring programs are dealing with. So thank you. Okay, we have 3 elements left to go in 40 minutes. We really dived into element 13. So we're
We
going to
did.
do our best to be efficient with our timing here.
That was an important one though, so that's
It
great.
was important. Okay. So element 14 is community engagement. And again, not going to review the standard of practice, but definitely recommend you checking out those standards of practice and practices to support the standard in the elements. Next slide, please. So some highlights here. Mentoring programs can't thrive in isolation. And You'll notice that a lot of what we talked about in element 13 directly relates to this element here. So how can you connect with other programs in your community? How can you tap into other resources in your community? How can you tap into the community that you're building within your program through your program participants? So community trust is essential.
Absolutely. I know we chatted about this a little bit, Sarah. You know, the reality of being in a community, and you all know your communities. So it may be that programmatically you want to connect with other organizations and share resources. You know, you're serving the same pool of young people, maybe different swaths of that population of youth. But while you think about collaboration, on the other hand, you may be in a community where organizations are competing for the same funding, whether that's grants or the attention of private funders or something like that. And so there's this kind of dichotomy of how you approach what partnership means. And we were just exploring this a little bit, whether you're a big program or a small program. Um, Perhaps it's important to think about the distinction between, as Sarah pointed out earlier, you know, the actual activities that you do, the pieces of the match that require funding, and how maybe those remain distinct because the characteristics of your organizations are distinct. But going back to logic models, there are things that all organizations have in common, like building your structural capacity or improving professional development for everyone. And we could see funders being very interested in, you know, regardless of the lane that a certain mentoring program might be in, helping many of the programs in your community bring in speakers or training or send you out to professional development opportunities so that whatever population you're serving, every program's getting stronger, but the way that you serve your community could be different and distinct. So we wondered what you all might think about that, or what the characteristics of your community and how collaborative all the programs that do similar things to what you do might be. Is it partnership friendly, or do you find a lot of competition?
Yeah, and I think that and we'll talk about this in sustainability as well, but there are ways to be in the same community, doing the same type of work, and finding ways to, again, have that partnership model rather than that competitive territorial mindset where, well, you are recruiting from my mentor pool. Now, let me remind you all, it takes 42 asks to the same community to get one person to say yes. I'm going to say that again. It takes 42 asks to the same community to get one person to say yes to be a mentor. So when we hear consistently in TA, how can we make recruitment better? Recruitment is so hard. Yeah, it is. It's hard. And volunteerism is down now more than it ever has been. So we need to work together, and we need to tap into our partnerships in our communities. And we need to be creative about how we're tapping into our communities. I had one program coordinator set up a table at the town dump because that's where people were going consistently on their Saturdays. And you know what? It worked. So, do you know where the people in your community are congregating, and are you tapping into it in a way that's creative and accessible? Because that's how people are going to find you.
I
So, other
can
things, partnerships with schools, nonprofits, and grassroots groups strengthen the relevance and sustainability. Programs should understand and honor the history, culture, and lived experiences of the communities they serve, which is why that diversity of perspective and making sure that you have a board and advisory board that reflects your community is so important.
So, Sarah, I cannot wait for our three-part series on dump-based recruitment coming in 2026. But that's a wonderful anecdote. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just also say something here because I feel, hey, the helping professions right now are under some stress and some strain, and we are all going to be competing for what is probably a shrinking pie, so to speak, in the years ahead. Hopefully not, but it seems maybe that's the way things are trending. That's going to increase this desire to be competitive. And I don't expect any of you to not, make the best case for your organization if there's funding available from either private or a public, entity. But I think the one thing I would ask everybody in this field is we all have to be champions for mentoring writ large. Um, and I have seen organizations over the years, I will not name names, but I have seen organizations that approach this with the viewpoint of, I'm going to tell funders in my community that we're the only good game in town, that if you're investing in other people, you're making a mistake, they don't run quality services, so on and so forth. And I just think, that is ultimately incredibly destructive to our movement. It creates an unhealthy kind of culture around mentoring. And so it's hard though. I mean, when you're competing for resources, it's hard to keep that bigger, I'm a champion for this thing that helps young people in mind. But I've seen some incredibly unethical and disappointing behavior out of program leaders in my time in this field, where they really try and convince, funders and stuff that everyone else is terrible, but we're not. And I encourage all of you not to go down those types of paths, right? Make a good case for your work. We're going to end today by talking about evaluation. And if you've got good results and can show that you're running a good program, that will give you a leg up, right? And just lean on that. You don't need to trash other people and programs along the way, right? Because someday your program might not exist, but you'd want mentoring to keep thriving, even if that's not the case. So just wanted to throw out, a lot of this work is heart work, but it's also ethics work, right? And values, and they can be hard in a competitive environment like we're in. So that's my 2 cents.
And we're going to dive into sustainability here in a hot second. And just one quick thing, recognizing that Vermont is unique and small, but when we had all of our programs across the state rally together and bombard their legislators and representatives all together in a collective voice, we increased our state funding by 600%. And all that funding gets funneled back through to all those programs that bombarded them. And so collective voice and working together will actually benefit programs in the long run rather than tear other programs down. So next slide, please. All right. Authentic engagement. I think this is what we were talking about a little bit. Authentic engagement avoids deficit-based and savior narratives and fosters inclusion. And then community support and awareness often determine whether programs survive or fade. If you aren't able to get that community investment, and when I say investment, I don't just mean money. I mean a program that believes in the work that you're doing and believes that you're there to support them, then you're going to flounder and you're going to struggle.
That's right. Yes, sir. I've heard you talk about, knowing your community, knowing the other service providers in your community, so that when you look at your capacity, when you look at your mission, you look at all that and find that maybe there's a mentoring opportunity coming to you that's not a good fit, that you can make a referral, make a recommendation somewhere in your community that really can serve the need. And that view really only comes from having the youth at the center of your focus. How do I help this person, even if it's not me personally providing the service to them? And that's where authentic engagement comes in, where you really do care about the partners in your community and see them as collaborators in the overall work that we're doing. Uh,
Yes. Thank you for reminding me about that, Elton,
mm,
because I do think it's important. Mentoring programs often become informal referral and resource centers. And when a mentoring relationship is working well, we know statistically that a mentor is often the first person a young person will tell about challenges that are happening at school, or the first person they come out to, or the first person they tell, like, ugh, things aren't great at home. And so it's not the mentor's job to be the savior or to sweep in or to um, I think one of the examples I gave earlier was, finding out that a young person didn't have the money to buy new clothes for school in the coming year, and they were growing out of the old ones. It's not the mentor's job to buy new clothes, but does your mentoring program have a list of community resources that then the mentor can sit down with the program coordinator, talk about what happened, and then together they can talk and connect those caregivers to more resources?
mhm,
So
yeah,
just making sure that you have an idea of what resources are available in your community is a
mm,
way to tap into it through authentic engagement and support.
that's right. And it makes sure that if it's an authentic engagement, then it makes sure that you know that resource does what you think it does. And when you make that referral, they actually provide the services you think they do. So when you build those bridges, then you know it's a good referral. And when they know your mentoring program well, they know they're making a referral that matches the kind of support you give. So that all comes from great bridges being built between the organizations and the community.
Absolutely.
All right.
So where is your program already trusted, and where do you need to build bridges? And this is applicable to school-based models as well, everyone. Um, I can't tell you the number of school-based programs that have struggled, and some have actually closed in the last year here because they didn't have all the bridges that they needed to show their school district that their program was necessary and was having an impact. So, where is your program already trusted? Where do you need to build bridges? This can be a question you can ask your team, your board, your community, so that you can start working towards building those bridges.
Mhm.
All right. Next slide, please. Moving into ba-ba-da-ba, sustainability
Yes.
and infrastructure. Next slide. Okay. So, long-term sustainability depends on diversified funding, sound budgeting, and ethical fundraising. And then infrastructure includes more than money. Marketing, communications, data management, and liability coverage all matter. So we've talked a lot about different ways to tap into creating a sustainable program through your staff and retention, through your community partnerships and engagements. And right now, obviously, funding is harder than ever. And we know that. But are you thinking about your funding down the line? And so say you're a new program, you got a 3-year grant to, serve your community. That's amazing. I can't tell you how many people have come to me with short-term grants and they don't think about how they're going to continue until year 3. And then they end up folding. And all that does is cause more harm to the young people involved in that program as opposed to doing more good, unless they intentionally sunsetted from the beginning that that was their intention. And so you really need to think about, okay, we have this funding. How can we use some of that to tap into existing resources in our community so that we can create a more sustainable program that lasts over time? And what does your grassroots fundraising efforts look like? And I think the one other thing I wanted to mention about this is the idea of competition, sometimes if you're serving in the same community, you might be applying for the same funding bucket. Okay, so you're applying for the same funding bucket. What are you using those funds for? Is it your infrastructure, or is it match activities, or mentor celebrations, or professional development opportunities? Can you talk to the other program and talk about, okay, how can we collaborate with some of this funding so that we both benefit from this bucket? If you are able to create a culture of, well, a culture of mentoring and a culture of collaboration and partnership, then you might be able to tap into the same resources, even if only one of you is getting that bucket from your funding. Be creative, because we have to work together in order to keep this mentoring movement moving forward.
Absolutely. Nothing to add on this one. I think the next slide, I have a couple thoughts.
All right, want to take it away, Elton?
Sure. We're gonna take a quick look at a just like a logic model preview, just a very basic one. Again, just to bounce back to that when we talk about program infrastructure, the components of your program and how you sustain them. And the exercise of walking through a logic model, not to get ahead of ourselves, it really helps you visualize and be honest with yourself about what parts of your program actually produce the result you're looking for. If there's something that you might have in your program that it doesn't add value or quality to the matches, but it's just an old habit or practice inherited from before, or it just seems like it's effective, but it's really not, that's a chance to get more efficient and make sure that whatever investment is coming in goes a lot further. So when we that's one piece of it. And then what this here is talking about, programs should budget with equity in mind, keeping DEI accommodations in mind, thinking about mentor activity costs, just thinking about what it takes to make sure that you're able to reach your audience, that there are no barriers to the services you're providing to your audience on either side, and that whoever you are serving, you're investing in the ability to do things where they see themselves and their needs being reflected in those services. So those are all good investments. Those are all the investments that go back to what Sarah was just sharing about program quality and the quality of the experience that those young people and the mentors are going to have. And then going toward strength-based messaging. I used to share this with a lot of programs out here that, they had some different strategies for fundraising, but in general, funders like to fund success. They rarely like to feel like they're trying to save the Titanic with a bucket. They want to feel like they're funding something that is moving forward with someone that has vision, they have a direction, a clear line from the inputs to the outputs. That's what they're looking to do. So when you constantly are sharing a message of the strengths that the young people have that you're serving, of course they have challenges, everyone does, but you're talking about how you're building upon the strengths those young people have, and you're listening to those young people, hearing what they're bringing to the table, and how we're continuing to help them mature and grow in their understanding of themselves and their community. That attracts investors quite a bit more than focusing on anything, on all the negatives. We see the negatives, but we want to know where we're going, and being able to communicate that really well is important. And then adequate infrastructure prevents sudden program closures. Mike just touched on that. And again, I think adequate infrastructure is a matter of, again, being honest about yourself, honest with yourself about what parts of your program actually produce the outcomes that you're looking for. So if you're missing something that would create better outcomes, reinvest, reallocate funds away from things that might be fun, but they're not effective. So that's a hard conversation sometimes, again, for people that are very relational, very heart oriented when it comes to the connections. But when we talk about sustainability, remember, it's an act of love to create the means by which you can keep serving the people you love for a longer period of time and more of them. So
Absolutely.
these investments are important.
And is your theory of change, that journey, that holistic journey from beginning to end that your young person goes through in your program, that long lasting impact you're making in your community, is it readable? Is it understandable? Is it a one pager that you can hand to stakeholders? Is your logic model readable and understandable and a one pager that you can hand to stakeholders? And when's the last time you updated it? Did you just create this thing so that you could get it out of the way for NQMS and say you did it and then you haven't touched it in 3 years? Or is it something that you're going back to?
Ready for the next slide?
Okay.
All right. Well, as promised, here it is, that logic model. I'm sure everyone's seen many different types and styles, but these are the basic essential pieces of a logic model. And the reason why we put this up here again is just to reemphasize, can't say it enough, that a logic model can serve as sort of a Rosetta Stone, that the great centerpiece of communication amongst many different stakeholders that speak different languages. They have different interests, different reasons that they're interested in seeing mentoring succeed. While whatever those differences may be, they all point toward the success of young people in our community and all that. But they may have a different item, a different area of your program that they're specifically interested in seeing go forward because that's what their work aligns with or their experience aligns with. So being able to um, very clearly, succinctly, and maybe visually, logic model tends to be very visual, show those who are connected with your program how their effort and their inputs lead to a positive change in the outcomes that we're looking for is extremely important. Again, I've talked with uh, people that went, program leaders that went to a funder and assumed that that funder had the same passion about working with young people that the program director did. And, um, you know, different personality types. Not everyone feels really connected with talking with teenagers. That might not be their thing, but they just know that we need to create the best world we can for our teens. So they want to hear, when I stick $1 in this side, how does it turn into the outcome you just described to me? And to be able to explain that well, it transforms the conversation. So they went in there talking about how many smiles they saw during meetings, how excited everyone was, and how many kids are interested in the activities, and that's great information, but that's not the language many funders speak. They have to go answer to their finance department or their corporate giving department and say, here's why we're budgeting some funds to go out to this organization. And smiles are important, but that's not the currency that they speak in. And then if you go out to talk with mentors, maybe they have a different motivation that they need, and you have to explain to them, when you give your time here, here's how the activities, the time you spend turns into an outcome. So when you can express that in a really clear way, you transform your ability to have others come alongside you and fill all the roles. There's so many roles involved in a successful program, and have them know exactly where they fit and how to be effective.
Absolutely. Elton, you know what this makes me think of? This makes me think of how we need to have really, really solid evaluation practices that tie directly back to our logic models so that when we go talk to funders, we have that data at our fingertips.
You said it, Sarah. Yeah.
We're going to talk about program evaluation, which is element 16. Next slide, please. So every program needs a written evaluation plan to guide data collection, analysis, and improvement. evaluation should measure the fidelity to your program model, your relationship quality, costs, and outcomes, there's that word again, across time. And findings must be able to be shared with stakeholders in accessible and transparent ways. So reports, infographics, community reflections. So can you take that logic model that you have, hand it to a stakeholder and show, here are the results from 2024 survey to show how these outcomes were achieved? Are
That's a,
you looking at your logic model when you're creating your surveys and writing your questions? And did you write a survey 5 years ago and that's the one that you use every single year? Are you updating it? Are you using those survey results to improve your program and practices?
that's exactly it. And that might sound strange to some. Like, what am I gonna carry a logic model around in my back pocket? Yes, I say yeah, do it. Make your like laminate it, stick it in your pocket for real. If that helps you with your elevator speech or whatever else, carry it around. People will think you're weird, but they won't forget you. Especially
Yeah.
the funders will.
Have
But
little folder packets prepared and ready to rock and
there
roll.
you go. Just have that there. Um, but for real, to go back and look at the instruments that you measure your program with, like those surveys that go out, making sure it's linked to the outcomes that you're looking for. For instance, if you're looking for improved school attendance or young people expressing more confidence talking with the adults in their lives, teachers, coaches, whoever else. If you're looking for that, we need to make sure that the instruments that we're using to find out about program quality to do our evaluations with ask questions specifically on those issues. So you can have a whole menu of questions that you think are important, but we have to make sure that they're asked in a way and have the wording that gets us the data that we need so we can report back with fidelity,
Yeah.
improvements or areas to look at, critical areas in our program. And that's both how the young people and mentors are experiencing the matches, but also evaluating whether or not we are doing all the activities that our program is supposed to do. We talked about that in the last webinar. Are are the matches meeting as frequently as they should? Are you doing your program check-ins as often as you said you would? Are you doing, you know, um, your mentor support meetings or trainings as often, on the frequency? All of those things are to be evaluated, and they all speak to program strength and health.
I would also recommend the way that you ask questions and asking it in the same type of question, but in different ways so that you can get both your qualitative and your quantitative data in the same thing. So if your outcome is that school performance is increased or there's a higher graduation rate, so do you have a pre and post survey, and have you created a culture of engagement in your program so that the pre-survey and the post-survey is normal and you don't have mentors saying, oh gosh, I have to do this again. They just know that it's coming. Are you asking in your pre and post survey that quantitative information, like what is your school performance right now? Do you feel comfortable talking to your mentor about school? And then afterwards in that post survey, you then have like, oh, look, school performance has increased. That's our quantitative. And X% of my program participants said that they feel like they can talk to their mentor about school. That's your relationship data. So when you go to your stakeholder and you understand what type of person they are, you can provide them the appropriate statistics so that you can speak to them in a way that they're understanding and processing so that they're going to invest in you. Mike
I think,
has a lot about evaluation. He's so knowledgeable about this stuff.
and just to the point you just made, I would also encourage folks, if you're going to be reporting on the outcomes that your mentees are experiencing, it's important to have a counterfactual of some kind, right? Meaning, I've seen programs that are like, oh, we wanted to improve school attendance. And lo and behold, our mentees were skipping school less this year. Well, that's great. But what's not being captured there is that all the students at the school skipped a little bit less because they have a new principal and the school culture is improved and the teachers are being less weird and the kids like being there more. And so all the kids at the school attended more, or they all did better at math because there's a much better math curriculum being deployed this year, right? So you need to have some kind of way of showing what would maybe happen if my program didn't exist. How do kids that in my community that are struggling with these that aren't in my mentoring program, how are they doing on some of these outcomes, right? And that can be hard to get because it involves, either finding data about young people that are not in your program, or sometimes even surveying young people who are not in your program, but are similar to the kids who are in your program, right? And so we don't have time to get into that kind of evaluation methodology today, but just know that you can ask people, hey, did you get better at something this year? It doesn't mean that maybe, how do we know it was your program that caused that? And so funders will ask you for that kind of thing, like, well, maybe all these kids did better. It also gets you out of the conundrum where sometimes kids don't do better at things, but the kids in your program are doing less worse, I guess. There was an infamous study years ago of a federally funded mentoring initiative where, boy, it sure looked from the time they started in the program to the time they ended the program that these kids were smoking more pot. And if you didn't know, you would think, oh my God, this program teaches kids to smoke pot. They're smoking more pot. Well, what they found is that kids who were not in the program were smoking a lot of pot. And the kids that were in the program were doing better on that, right? Yeah, because the program was serving like high school freshmen and sophomores, which is exactly the age when almost all young people start experimenting with certain things, right? And so all the young people in the community were kind of doing less good than they were when they were younger around that. But the kids in the program had reduced harm, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. And so I encourage folks to find a counterfactual if you can, even if that's just, well, kids in our school district are at this level, but the kids in our program are a little better. That counts too, right? And so when you're trying to tell the story of your impact, you have to be able to tell a story of like, well, what would this look like if we just disappeared and there was no one helping, right? And so keep that in mind. Yes, harm reduction, Jennifer, is the operative phrase there.
Mike, I wonder what you'd say about this, Mike. That I think investors, especially if it's coming from the financial standpoint of getting support, they appreciate that integrity in the data. They
Yes.
already assume they're being sold, oh, our program can do it all, but when we're honest about that data, and even if because we're doing great evaluation, even if you find a place where you're not seeing the results you want, you can say, but we think we could improve with some more investment in this area of our program. These parts are strong, but here's where we need help. That's what they want to do is help something that's moving forward, but just wherever there's some weak spots, get it going. And the more
Yeah,
honest we are about our data, the more they trust that we're being a good steward with their investment.
absolutely. And to that point, I will draw folks' attention to the middle bullet on this slide where we talk about measuring three things, not just outcomes. Everyone wants to skip to that final box of the logic model and like, oh, outcomes. But if you can't tell a story about how you're getting there, meaning we run a good program, we're checking in with our mentors, we're training them properly, we're supporting the kids as things bubble up in their lives because we have procedures and policies that we're adhering to. We're also measuring the quality of these relationships. You don't get to any of the outcomes if the kid and the volunteer are like, I kind of sort of enjoy this, but it's not going very well. Like they need to be doing well in a relationship before you get to any of the outcomes, right? And so I really encourage folks to focus on the first two things in that sentence and not just the word outcomes, because outcomes can be elusive, right? There's a lot of things happening with kids, and you can't maybe impact all of them, but you can at least show a funder like we're running a really tight ship. and we're producing relationships that people value and they're finding love. Whether they get better grades or not might be dependent on a teacher more than the mentor, but we're creating love and support and caring in these people's lives. You can always measure that. Whether they then go on to wild success in life is dependent on a lot of things. So when you're putting together that logic model, don't make stupid promises in the outcome box, right? Make sure that they're realistic. Make sure that there are things that you could take credit for and that you could really achieve. I see a lot of programs promising things that, you can't solve systemic problems with one mentor 1 day a week alone, right? And so be careful about what you put in that outcome box, but then measure it, right? If you're not being able to tell that story, you will not be successful in terms of sustainability.
Yeah. And just from a national stats perspective for mentoring programs across the country, evaluation in the NQMS, the National Quality Mentoring System, is consistently rated lower than any other category for NQMS, and that programs are struggling to meet best practices based off of the elements in this category. And this is ranging from, does your program have a written evaluation plan, to does your program examine youth outcomes through the lens of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, disability, etc., to see how different groups of youth are experiencing the program? And are you evaluating that? So just to say that this is a category that programs across the country are struggling with, and arguably this is the category that's going to allow you to improve the quality of your program if you're doing it well and you're doing it consistently and you're not just doing it for lip service.
I will say, Sarah, also, this is an area where programs can get better and a lot better without maybe a lot of effort sometimes. So we do a lot of training and support around evaluation. And you're right, programs often rate themselves kind of at baseline very low on this. They either don't do it or they're doing it in kind of like haphazard, they're winging it basically. But we evaluated the impact of all of our technical assistance on evaluation topics, and that is the area where programs report the most gain when they work with somebody from Mentors Network to kind of figure, or even a local person from a university or whoever they have access to that knows evaluation. Like, you can really make leaps and bounds in this aspect of your program with like not a ton of effort, right? And it's just a matter of tapping into the right expertise. So I know evaluation's an intimidating topic, but it's an area where you can really get better at it. And when we measured, folks saying, "Oh, I'm better at this now," that was the biggest growth area for everybody that we worked with out of all the topics we helped them with. So,
Okay. So we just a couple last highlights. Oh, and thank you, Mike. Sorry, I got distracted by chat. um, and a couple last highlights. Participatory evaluation. So how many of the program participants are having an impact on how you design and interpret your evaluation so that you're making the evaluation process participatory and meaningful? And then finally, evaluation is only valuable if findings lead to actual improvements in program practices and participant experiences. So again, we don't do evaluation just to say that we do evaluation. We do evaluation because we have a continuous improvement mindset where we want to learn and grow and create a meaningful and impactful program. So we're going to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Elton.
No, I just said excellent. Nothing to add.
We are closing in on time, so we will let Jake do his final things. But if you do have any lingering last-minute questions, drop them in that Q&A chat for us.
Yeah, we're sad for all the questions we didn't get to address directly, but these are outstanding and we'll definitely aim to reconnect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and any questions that you drop in the Q&A now or that we didn't get to address, I'll loop back with everybody and maybe we'll post them under the recording on the website so that everybody gets their answer. Because thank you so much for asking the questions and for your engagement today to everybody. But first of all, thank you so much to Sarah, Elton, and Mike for this incredible series. I couldn't think of a better group to be doing this. And thank you so much for all of your insights, your tips, your strategies. I have a couple additional resources, and then I'll give you all the floor to share any last thoughts that you have. But of course, stay in touch with us. You can email us at collaborativewebinarseries@mentoring.org. Connect, as we said, with your mentor affiliates or someone that's nearby, if you don't have one in your state, for support on training, resources, public awareness, and advocacy. We have the Mentoring Connector where you can upload your program or find other programs in your area by going to our website as well. And then, of course, as Mike was talking about, we have the National Mentoring Resource Center where you can apply for no-cost technical assistance. Please take 3 to 4 minutes to complete the quick survey. It's anonymous to let us know how we did with this webinar so that we can continuously improve and also know what was impactful for you so we can build on that as well. And as always, you'll receive an email and it'll be posted to the website with the slides, all of the resources we talked about today, and the recording. And then our next series, we're taking a break in September, but we're coming back for the end of the year. It'll be another 3-part series, Conversations with Youth. If you've attended webinars in the past years, this is something that we did where we uplift and platform young people in the mentoring field to talk about their experiences. But in this last minute or so, I wanted to, since you all were the hosts of this whole series, Sarah, Elton, and Mike, any final words, any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Want me to go first? Well,
Absolutely.
first of all, thank you all for connecting. We were sharing today, but we learned a ton from all of you. And I just want to say, please be kind to yourselves. The work that we are doing is extremely challenging, and it's challenging for any aspect of the mentoring world that we work in. People are not robots with buttons and levers. We are organic creatures that need to be watered and nurtured, and it can be a while before you see something sprout from the soil, but it's growing. And if we're kind to ourselves, it'll help us be kind to others.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'd say is if you talk to any TA provider or master trainer and ask them which element they think is the most important, I almost guarantee that you're going to get different answers across the board. And what that tells me is that all of these are important. And I think the way that we, Mike and his team, these new elements have been designed is really to show you just how circular and how much they feed into each other are so that when you have a strong program design and you center quality in your program delivery, and then you have strong staff support and you strong sustainability and strong foundations, you're going to have a really impactful program where young people, the core of our work, are going to feel supported. And so thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Elton and Sarah said. Thank you all so much. I hope you set aside those frustrations and pain points that we talked about a little bit earlier and avoid that burnout because frankly, our young people in our communities need you more than ever. I don't need to say much more about the divisions in this country or the things that young people are experiencing, but the only path forward is to lead with love and to lead with relationships. And if we want to make any of that stuff better, it's going to take work just like this and people just like you. So keep it up and we'll keep being here to support you. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you all so much again. Thank you everybody for attending. Again, this recording will be posted on our website, so feel free to catch it there in about a week. But hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.